I think there's something to the fact that you don't set out to be the best or win an award or achieve. It's doing it for the sake of doing it.
Raleigh and I looked at each other one day after we retired, and we said, we can honestly say we never did one thing for a selfish reason.
Hi, it's your friend Lizzie, and welcome back to the Lean In with Lizzie podcast. I'm so happy you're here today. I have a guest that I'm personally so excited to introduce you to, and it's a topic that we all care about. I want to acknowledge you for taking a minute to do something to better yourself and make a more abundant life. Today's guest is someone that's impacted my life in a really amazing way. I'm bringing you my 93-year-old grandma. Today, my granny Phyllis is going to give you all of her tricks and tips on longevity. Not just about how to live longer, but how to live better. How do you have a mindset and mentality of joy, of excitement, and just accepting things the way they are? Grandma, welcome to the show.
Thank you. This is a privilege.
So there's not a lot of people who hit 93. That's pretty amazing in and of itself. But then beyond that, who make it to 93 and still love their life and love what they're doing and find meaning in it. So thanks for coming and inspiring all of us and inspiring me. So I want to kind of dive in first to just health in general, a little bit about physical health, mental health, emotional health. It's almost funny to ask you some of these questions because I know you so well and I know the pragmatic answers you're going to give. But tell me a little bit about your physical health. How have you stayed so healthy? How have you lived as long as you have?
I think part of it is because I have a lot of energy, even at this age. And I've always had a lot of energy, physical energy, mental energy. I think what happens is if you generally have good health, you have good energy. If you have good physical energy, you're ready to go. And age doesn't matter completely. So through the years, I've had two heavy focus: exercise and sleep. And I happen to do very well with those. Diet, which is a big deal today, it's okay. I've never been on a binge. I've never been on a really focused diet, but I eat generally quite well.
Tell me about exercise.
Exercise. I have always walked a lot. Now, remember, when you're 93, you don't have all of the wonderful conveniences of travel through the years. And I lived in a small town in the Midwest, and we walked wherever we went. So that became a part of me forever. And it still is. I walk every day for at least twice, 45 minutes. And besides that, I work in my yard for 2 to 3 hours still. On my hands and knees, I love to get into the dirt. There's something magical that happens when you're there. If you have a problem in your mind or your thoughts, for me, when I get into the yard and I'm in the dirt, I don't think of anything. I can't understand, but other gardeners have responded the same way. So exercise.
I love that some of these things in your generation were just common sense. And there wasn't really an option. Like most people walked because you kind of had to. And a lot of people garden or did those things. And then we hit a place in our world's history where you didn't have to. And then all the research is coming out to say that's actually the best way to live. There's all the grounding. You should put your feet in the ground and your hands in the dirt. And you just did that, but you feel like it's made a huge impact on your well-being.
And it can continue. I'm 93, and when I get finished with this rehab, having had a fall, I will be back out in the yard on my hands and knees, digging in the dirt. And what I'm thinking about is nothing. It's hard to explain. How can that be? It's a form of meditation, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really exemplifies like flow state. When you almost forget what you're doing, you're so engrossed in it. So what about people who are your age or a little bit younger and haven't been walking or haven't done some of that? It hasn't been from the time they were a child. What advice would you give to them?
Well, I have a neighborhood like that. I'm the oldest in the neighborhood and the only one woman that seems to be out as much as I am. But they're talented. They knit, they crochet, they quilt. None of those are of interest to me. So
she's not your average granny.
So therefore, I'm not able to sit. I am a voracious reader, and I don't start reading till about 8:30 at night. That's my time. But the rest of the day, I'm out. I don't understand what these women are doing all day long, that they're never outside. Nature is number one for me.
Yep. I love that.
Absolutely.
What a great tip. Get outside, whether it's walking or gardening or meeting up with a friend or doing something.
Right.
Be in the earth, be in the ground. So you mentioned reading, which is something since I was a little girl, I remember about you and have loved about you. And you know that we have a connection on. I love to read, passing that on to our kids, which was really fun for me. Tell me about like when the love of reading started. Was that something you were taught really young? How did that happen in your life?
The interesting thing about generational change is our parents never promoted sit down and read every day. They didn't teach us to read. I didn't learn to read until I went to first grade. There was no preschool, no kindergarten, and my mother read occasionally, but it wasn't a big thing. It was almost like let life unfold in a natural way without so much emphasis, formal training. And so I picked up reading evidently very fast when I was in first grade. In fact, the teacher took me to a convention of other teachers for me to read to these teachers. At the time, I had no idea why I was taken, but evidently I picked up on reading so fast in first grade. That was then. This is now? No.
Now it's very rigid and scheduled, and there's whole kits that you can buy for every single letter. But I love that that just kind of unfolded and they let that unfold. Tell me about when you fell in love with reading. Do you remember your first book, or do you remember when it kind of came alive to you?
I don't remember that specifically, but I went to a 2-room schoolhouse, grades 1 through 4. And I remember a wonderful book in 4th grade, and I was listening. I was in first grade, and I was just as in tune with them in 4th grade. And it was a book about traveling to Europe, meeting other cultures. That was my first and memorable appeal to reading.
I love that. Okay, so you wait to read until 8:30 p.m. And then about how many hours do you read a day? How many books do you read, say, in a month? Or how many books do you think you read in a year?
Oh, I read a lot. Probably one a week.
A book a week at 93.
Well, it depends on the length of the book. I've read some dilly 400 or 500 page books. I do belong to a book group. I'm very interested in history-based fiction or historic or documentary. I keep wanting to learn. That is absolutely essential. So some frivolous fiction is okay, but it's not at the top of my list.
How do you think that's played with your mental health? What's the interplay between reading, between learning, and your mindset?
Well, you keep learning. As you're reading, it unfolds. It's magical. I'm so happy that I still have good eyesight, that I can read, because some of my friends can't. In fact, they want me, I've written my life history, and they want me to meet on a regular basis and read aloud my life history to them. This will be a blast.
That is so sweet. Do you have a favorite book? Or one you would recommend for someone else? Like if you need a book right now, if you're not a reader, what would you recommend?
A recent book that I read, which I think is valuable, called The Distance Between Us. I can't remember the author's name, but it is a new perspective on people wanting to leave from Mexico to come to the United States. And it's a true story about these families. And the woman who wrote the book is now a well-known lecturer and an author. And when she arrived in the United States, at about age 9, she knew no English. And so the book goes through the transition and the difficulty of striving for something that they want so badly. And what I like about it is we have a perspective about people crossing the border. They must be criminals. They must be people involved in drugs. This was not like that. It's a gentle, caring book to give you a new perspective.
I love that. 93, and like you're stepping into someone else's shoes and still saying, I might not know it all or have it all figured out. And books take you to that place to have the empathy and the understanding. Do you have any other practices that you feel like have helped keep your mind strong?
I've always loved to play the piano. And I started when I was 10 years old. My family didn't have very much money. I never had a bike of my own. I never had many opportunities. But my father met with someone who gave piano lessons. And he said, Phyllis, would you like to take lessons? I took lessons from Merle Schultzen, was her name, when I was 10 years old. And I just consumed it. she'd give me lessons to prepare, and I was ready the next day. So that is a powerful part of my life, music. So I became a fairly good pianist, classical. Now I play a lot of jazz. Every day I play at least 45 minutes a day. And now that I'm living with my daughter temporarily, I play twice a day. Very fulfilling for me.
Great thing about Phyllis is, sadly, about a month ago, she fell, fractured her pelvis, and then went to a rehab center. And you know how they sometimes will schedule families or groups to come in and do the music? She provided the music at the rehab center, which I just love about you. And it says so much, but that's like, that keeps your mind strong.
Yes.
That keeps your body strong. It's also a form of service and giving back because people are listening. And something, I wish we had a recording of this. When she plays music, she laughs. Just like this. So she'll sit there, play the music, and then give a giggle. But it's just, I don't know if it's because you're just so in flow or you're just so full of joy, but you laugh as you play.
It's just a lot of fun. And if I have grandchildren, sometimes maybe 5 or 6 sitting in my living room and I'm playing the piano, I will make up words about them and chords and music in the background. So they're totally entranced, wondering, what is she going to say about us? How is she going to put that to her music? That's fun.
It's so good. So I love these tips. Find something that gets you into flow. Find something that makes you engaged, where you forget the passage of time, where you don't even really know what's happening. And maybe you're laughing. You're giggling because it's just so joy-filled. Now, I want to ask a question that maybe I already know the answer to, but I've never asked you this question. What do you do when you're in a bad mood? And honest to goodness, I've never seen you in a bad mood, which I don't think is just like you've never felt like you're in a bad mood or you've never been in one. But how do you come across that way? What do you do when you feel that way? What is the mental process of that?
That's an interesting question, because when you said bad mood, I'm not a moody person at all. But if something is troubling me, I try to shift gears. In other words, I try to shift my thinking in another direction, whatever. For example, if I have a precious piece of sculpture on a table and one of my great-grandchildren breaks it, immediately I say, well, that's the way it is. I'm not fretting. In fact, I should have not put it there in the first place. So I really don't fret over little things. Yes, I can be troubled about difficult things, and they're seldom about me. They're always about somebody else in my life, whose life I would like to touch in a positive way if I can. So I always hope that my home is an oasis. In other words, if somebody comes in, they feel good about that. They could feel about a feeling, a sensitivity. They know I have empathy.
I think I'm going to etch that or cross stitch it. You and I both don't cross stitch, so we'll have to hire someone else to do this.
Right.
That's the way it is. That's the way it is.
Yeah.
So fine.
Yeah.
So something happened with it. Like, you still can be empathetic, but recognizing and just embracing like the radical truth that like, that's the way it is now.
That's right.
It's beautiful. Okay. Cross stitch that for me, would you?
Okay.
Okay. Can we dive into some hard times?
Okay.
Which you don't do, really. You don't focus on them. You don't sit and ruminate on things like this. But I want to ask you, so you've been a widow for 5 years, which I've never associated the word widow with you, but you have been
I have.
for about 5?
Almost 6.
Almost 6 years. How did you transition and deal with that loss?
Well, my husband, Raleigh, was a firecracker. He made life exciting. He was impromptu. He was moody. He could be happy. He could be angry. And I lived with all of that. It was never boring. I often thought, how would it be to live with a same every day? So there were hard times with that because I'm more easygoing. I'm more positive in some ways. But his attitude was always to get something done, to accomplish. So I missed that. But he was ill for some time. So to transition to the fact that he was dying wasn't an overnight thing. It was something I knew was going to happen, and it happened, and it was meant to happen. So I moved on.
I was just reading a little bit about Albert Einstein, and the day that he died, you're going to think of yourself because I thought of you this whole time, not because he died, because we've got another decade at least together. He had been troubled with a few things. He had a grapefruit-sized tumor, something in him they had removed, so he didn't have an aneurysm. I mean, he had been dealing with things for a while. But the day that he died, if you went and saw his office, there's pictures online, there's books everywhere, there's writing out. To the hospital, he brought with him a piece of paper with a speech he was working on to give to the Israeli television. And then when he got there and they kind of diagnosed what it was and realized what it was, they told him, you know what, there's this surgery we could try. We're thinking that we just don't really know how it's going to go. And he said, I have done my share. I would like to go elegantly.
Oh, I like that.
Isn't that beautiful? And the thing that I think about with you and with Grandpa is, again, this acceptance and doing things elegantly. And you approaching with Grandpa's life saying, I've done my share. He's done his share. We've done our share as a married couple. And I'm inspired by that.
When I turned 90, I said to myself, oop, not too many people live 10 more years. And then I said, oh, not too many people live to be 90. And so after that, because you have a different mindset, I don't think about my dying too often, but I do say, well, I'm not afraid to die. I'm just disappointed. And life is still so great, so many wonderful people, so many things to learn and do, that would be a disappointment. But I'm not afraid to die.
I think you spend more time thinking about how you're going to live than thinking about dying. And that's what consumes your thoughts. How am I living? What's bringing me life? Okay, one more. Your son, John.
Yes.
When he passed, I know that was a real hit to you and a real hard time. How did you deal with that? How did you process that?
He was 49 years old and he had 4 children. He led an exciting life. He was an FBI agent in charge of counterterrorism, lived in Kenya for 3 years, lived in Egypt for 3, and Raleigh and I had an opportunity to stay for a month in each of those places and be with their family. It was very sad because he was so young. But when it became known, he died of tongue cancer, which happens usually to old men who've been chewing tobacco or smoking, which John never did.
He had won fitness awards in the FBI. Yes. He was the opposite of that picture.
Exactly. He was a decathlete at Brigham Young University, meaning he competed in 10 different sports. And yeah, he was a natural athlete. He was a dynamo, but he was a very respectful. People trusted him because of his nature and his attitude. And I had a great relationship with John. So it was a personal loss. At the same time, it had to be. It was the way it is. And so I don't predict where he is now. Many people do. I always say, I hope, people will say, aren't you happy that John and your husband are together? And they sort of think they're on a park bench talking. I'm not sure about that. I just say, I hope. So what will be, will be. But it was difficult.
What's the message you would want to give someone going through something like that, or going through a transition, like also accepting aging? That's also a transition that you can't stop the train from moving when something happens like that. What would be your message to someone going through those hard times?
Well, it helps if you have a positive attitude about life to begin with. It helps if you interact with people and keep being sociable. If you're able physically to do, keep it up, keep it up. I would say lie a little bit. Lie to yourself. In other words, I'm 93, but it's okay. I can still do this, and I can do this, and I can do this, instead of fretting about it or dwelling on it. All of the above, whether it's music or reading or being sociable or able to exercise or being able to enjoy the Olympics, which I did. It was a beautiful experience. There's so much left to learn. And so what happened to me when I fell a month ago, I had finished my life history. It was about 900 pages long. But I'm 93, and I thought, my life isn't over. So when I fell, I started to say, that had to be. That was another chapter that I need to experience, learn from, and write about.
You said about 900 pages.
Mm-hmm.
So about 100 pages every decade of your life. So you've got another 100 to write this one.
That's right.
So there's part of that chapter.
Yes, my expectancy for life is 102, and anything more than that is a bonus.
Oh, I love you. Okay, so let's go back in time again for a minute and talk about your decision to work, to decide what your life was going to look like. Did your mom work? Did your parents work? How did you make that decision to become a teacher?
My mother did not work. And in my small town in the Midwest, I was one of the few who went to college. But it was always a goal of mine. And this is the irony. I know we have a lot of helicopter parents today, put a lot of pressure on their children. My family didn't. I was motivated. I loved learning from the time I stepped into school forever. So that was just a given that I would do that. I went to the university, and I didn't plan to be a teacher. The choices then were kind of, this is 1949. The choices were a teacher, a secretary, or a nurse, basically. I'm narrowing it down, of course. I didn't want to be any of those. So I had my own program at the university in radio. TV was not yet in. And doing journalism. And then I met this handsome, good-looking young man named Raleigh. And we decided eventually, after a few years, we would get married. And I said, oh, journalism, none of those are practical. I guess I'll be a teacher. And that's how it started. And I first taught, we were married for about 5 years, and I thought we would have a baby immediately. It didn't happen until I signed my first teaching contract. And the very almost day that I signed it, my new principal in a new school, I went to him and I said, Mr. Wickland, you need to know that I'm pregnant. He said, I have far more important things to worry about. And because at that time, pregnant women did not teach. You wouldn't be seen in the classroom. So I taught in Wisconsin for 6 months before my son was born. Then we moved to Colorado, and I took the place of a woman who had to leave in the middle of the year. So I taught another 6 months. Then we moved to Utah because my husband was going to get his doctor's degree. So to help the cause, by this time we're 36 years old and we have 4 children. So I started junior high school. I taught 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and at BYU, and fell in love with it. It was so fulfilling. Raleigh supported me. He thought I was a good teacher and a good mother. You can do both. At least I did.
What did you love most about teaching?
I would always say to myself, what can I do that I've never done before when I was preparing what I was going to teach? And that kept me fresh. I had very few things in a filing cabinet. In other words, I didn't go back and do this, like I'd done the past 20 years. And the thing I loved most was that, the energy that I put into it, and then the energy that I felt from my students. High school was my favorite because they are naughty, they are sassy, they are creative, they are thinking they're adults, which they kind of are. So you help them along the way. I loved it. In fact, 85% of my dreams now, I am teaching. That's unbelievable.
That is unbelievable. Life has kind of come full circle for me because now I'm working at a school part-time, helping in our kids' school. And it's been really sweet to think about you being in the school and the things that you loved about it. And I would say really similar things for me. I love creating something new and thinking about how are they going to capture this moment? How are they going to capture this emotion or feel motivated or feel seen and loved, truly. Just this morning, I did a discussion in one of our classes that talked about the attributes of a hero and what are the values and the virtues. And I got a little box with these trinkets, some bullets from World War I that I got in Italy, and brought these artifacts in and talked about throughout all humankind, through knights of shining armor and world wars and all the way down to today, there's still some values that make these everyday heroes. But just creating that for me was such a blast. And then presenting it in a way that felt sacred, that felt special, that felt like we're on special ground right now. We're doing something unique and you matter. You know, I think it fires me up. I woke up this morning and said, I love what I do.
Oh,
I love it.
I love the word everyday hero because in a way, that's what you do as a teacher. Help your students to feel like they are a hero for the day in your relationship with them. They're important. They're doing good things. You value that. You respect that. And sometimes when I discover the kind of home that a particular student came from, I just shake my head and say, how does she make it? How does she come here with such a good attitude? I have got to have her help, again, this oasis of something refreshing, something stimulating, something positive.
How do you do that? What does that look like when you find a child like that, or when you were teaching? How do you help them feel seen and loved and valued and that you believe in them?
It's very mysterious in a way. How do you do that with 36 students, which I usually had in my classroom? But if you're in tune with why am I here? Is it just to present this particular process of writing? Is it just as important to notice that she's looking unhappy, that she's not rebellious? I never had students who acted like that. Almost none. But there was a look on the face that you recognize there's something going on, and call her in. Don't say what's troubling you. Just say, I'd like to get to know you better. Tell me about you. What do you like to do? I've noticed when you write, it's very thoughtful, more thoughtful than a lot of people your age, things like that.
But don't call out, how are you doing? Is there something troubling you? Just let them talk.
Yeah. Don't. They probably don't want you to know that they have a bad background or that something's troubling you, but it will come out if you establish a relationship.
It's beautiful. I love that. Tell me about motherhood. What are you most proud of in your motherhood?
Motherhood.
There's some words I don't really associate with you. Motherhood, said in that tone. Bad mood.
No.
But you raised incredible children.
And
I know you were deeply engaged and there were things you loved. And what did you love most? What are you most proud of?
Well, proud often sounds like they are what they are because I did it. So I kind of don't say proud. I kind of say one of the things I hope my children do is do something good for the world. And people would say, oh, he could be a lawyer or he could be a doctor. I say, whatever he chooses, something good for the world. So we don't label people by titles like that, but we recognize the spirit that they have. I think Raleigh and I balanced our children's lives very well. We had high expectations of being good people, helping other people, sharing with other people, performing. On the other hand, we didn't pressure so much. I keep bringing that up. There was pressure enough to say, do the best you can, but not, okay, you've got to get this. I taught a lot of honors students, and sometimes they were overloaded. I said, why are you taking all these honors classes? They say, well, I've got to have a scholarship, and I've got to go to this university. All of that was in their brain, placed there by their parents. So there was a certain amount of freedom that we gave. And then our children, they were talented athletes, and they were talented musicians. That gave them an opportunity to take risks. In fact, that was a key I always talked about. I'm delighted that our children are risk takers. And when we moved to this culture, we were one of the few families that were not members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In fact, for 11 years we weren't. But these 4 children stepped out. And somewhere along the way, they had the confidence to not sit in the background and worry they weren't like somebody else. Here's one little bragging thing I have to tell you. It's not bragging, but it's powerful. Each year at Orem High School, the teachers choose a student who, as they say, has contributed the most to the school. Now, remember, our children are not members of this culture at that time. Kurt, the oldest, was chosen as the boy who contributed the most. Jill, the next year, got the same award. Carrie, the next year, they're each a year apart. Carrie, the next year, got the same award. It's called the Tigerama Award. And when it came to John, I couldn't believe it. he got that award. That didn't mean they were the smartest. They were the most beautiful. I love the word. They contributed. That's amazing to think back.
And knowing all four of them, they were all very unique in the ways they did it.
That's right.
Kurt's contribution didn't look the same as Carrie's or Jill's or John's, but they found their ways to do it.
That's right.
Dave and I, my husband and I, have often reflected that a lot of the people we see being the most successful and confident in their work, sometimes their parents actually weren't that much involved. And we've questioned, like, why does that happen that way? But I think what you've talked about, sometimes that freedom to take risks and try things that maybe other people would say, oh, that's not worth your time, or why are you doing that? Or you should be pushing harder in something that will achieve something. But instead just saying, go explore, go try something out. And perhaps you being in the school and engaged, but not meddling in their business all the time, gave them that freedom to be unique individuals, but just knowing you and Grandpa with that emphasis of, but what can I do to help someone else? To make the school better, to make this class better, to make my situation, my family, my company better. And they all did that. That was for sure a consistent theme.
The word was contribution, not competition or coordination. Not competition. That's a big deal today. And how to balance that is amazingly difficult.
Okay, we're going to do something fun now called the lightning round. I do this in the middle of some of my episodes. And it's just a one-word answer, a two-word answer. Favorite food?
Do,
do.
Ding, ding,
You don't
ding,
care a lot
ding,
about food.
I don't.
If I asked her favorite food to make, we have so many good stories. There were about 3 or 4 on rotation that you'd make after school. And none of them were anything you'd think of. I can't wait to go to Grandma's house to just taste her wonderful home-cooked meal.
No, I was not a gourmet cook. I didn't collect recipes at all. In fact, here's a funny story. My husband, Raleigh, was the first one in our family to can. I didn't, because he happened to have a schedule that allowed him to harvest peaches. And then he met some of these good Mormon ladies, and he said, do you have recipes for canning peaches? And so they gave him a recipe, and I came home, and there were 12 gleaming jars of freshly canned peaches, which he did. I didn't. One day, a lady knocked on my door, and she said, I have something. Is Raleigh here? And I said, no. And she said, I have something for you. And as I stood at the door, I was wearing cut-off frayed shorts, just like casual me. And she said, I have a recipe for Raleigh for Potawatomi jam. And then she looked at me and she said, as she looked on the top of me down to the bottom, she said, just what is it you do?
Oh, you didn't fit the mold in the best of ways. Okay, back to the lightning round. Let's see if we can do the next one in one word. But I like stories too. Any products you can't live without?
Products.
I just love this because these are things that every influencer has, their products they can't live without. And they're all our favorite foods. And like, does it matter?
Yeah, that's how I feel.
Is there anything you can't live without?
Right.
Not really.
That's
Water?
Right.
Oh, what's your guilty pleasure?
Oh, guilty. I'm not cooperating at all. Sorry.
Oh, I love this. If you could go back to any age, which age would you pick?
Go back. Probably 50s.
50s.
Mm-hmm. It's a great time.
Oh, that's amazing. If you had to choose a different career than teaching, what would you pick? If you could go back right now and you couldn't be a teacher?
Perhaps writing, a big attempt at becoming an author. And I have done a lot of writing.
Yep.
My name is Phyllis, and I've written 2 books called Philosophical Notions. Isn't that great?
That's so great. Okay, what's your favorite season?
Several. I can't say which one. I loved winter when I could ski. Raleigh and I were avid skiers. Spring, summer, fall.
You just like life.
Whatever's coming next.
If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh, that means
It could be going on a walk with them too, since you don't care much about dinner.
That's right. Going on a walk with you.
Oh, thank you. I feel that way every time I'm with you. Okay, you've lived 93 years. What's the biggest change you've seen in the world in your lifetime?
Media. And right now, in this amazing, uncivil, if you look at it, time of life, I'm concerned. Diversity is very important, but I'm one down the middle. I'm not a diehard this or this. I was never a sorority girl. So I always cheered, hopefully, for what I thought was the good of either side of an issue. So that's a disturbing thing, how media can distort things. It can make beautiful things, but it can also distort things. So it's important to be a critical thinker.
What a beautiful thing to remember on an election year.
Yes.
Cheer on the good on both sides, because we need both.
That's right.
We need both. What else? How else has media changed the world? What do you see? What do you champion in that? What excites you in that? And what do you have maybe a caution for us with?
Well, it's a matter of choices. You have choices. You can steer away from the negative, steer away from the sensational, steer away from everything that's meant to amuse you or entertain you, and look for the true focus that someone is presenting. And that's important to me. Also, I believe in multi-sources of information. So I still read newspapers, the actual paper. Mm-hmm. I still Google. I love to Google. I love it. As soon as there's something I don't know, I put it in. And I'm like the place Stonehenge, where I was for rehab. Stonehenge. Why in the world was that name Stonehenge? And I discovered, of course, in England there is it's either a burial mound or a healing place. And so they must have chosen to name their place Stonehenge for the healing, not for the burial.
They're not burying you anytime soon. Right. But again, what a great tip. Stay curious. And media in the wrong light can make you more moody and depressed and anxious and frustrated. But in the other, it lets you be curious all the time.
And when you interact with people, if you're talking, I love to have good, meaningful discussions. Not about recipes, of course, mm-hmm. but can you really look at someone and say, I know we don't agree on this issue, but tell me how you came to believe that. What caused you to believe that? And I'm not defensive. I'm not needing to prove I'm right. I'm not needing to defend myself and tear you down. That isn't a part of who I am. I think some of my debate experience, I was a champion debater in high school and at the University of Wisconsin. And if you're a debater, it's a formal situation where you get points for how well you defend your point of view. And if you don't do it in a factual, informative way, you're going to lose the debate. So I think of, sometimes how you can apply that. In fact, it could be a very good experience in education. Not to the extent I went, but to have that whole process of critical thinking.
Yep. We do that a lot at our school, and it's one of my favorite things. I remember my kids came home, and they always have these Socratic discussions. And someone states an opinion, and they're taught and practice all the time how to give supporting arguments and give evidence. But then they're welcome to say, I disagree. Or I agree because, and I remember the first couple weeks we came home and my kids started using this around the dinner table and right to their siblings' faces, I disagree. Because at first I was like waiting for the reaction, like, is there a fight that's going to ensue? And no, it's just okay to disagree and not be emotional about it. Just state it.
I say you have the right to your opinion and the responsibility to support it.
Ooh, that's good. Dropping wisdom, Granny. What's your favorite thing about yourself?
Oh, about myself. So look at the bright side of life almost all the time. To find ways to be diversified in my thinking. I like that about myself. I think it makes for good discussions with most people. I was a Catholic all of my life and my siblings. So I became a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My brother became a Methodist. My other brother became a Seventh-day Adventist. And my sister is a Lutheran. Now, you might say, wow, your parents did a terrible job of teaching you. No, they didn't. They were fantastically wonderful, thoughtful people in no college degree on their part, just a sensitivity about others. So you can imagine the good discussions I have with my siblings. In fact, when my mother died, before the funeral, we're making arrangements, and it was a Catholic funeral, and the priest said, "You are the most ecumenical family I have ever met." That was a compliment.
Yes. Yep. I remember visiting when you turned 90, we went out to Wisconsin, all the granddaughters and nieces and nephews, and meeting some of your family. And I've been raised primarily in Utah and then lived in Connecticut for a decade, and we've come back with our kids, but always felt like I love, my faith is a huge part of my life, you know that. But feeling like the connection is actually God, and the connection is peace, and the connection is loving my fellow men. When I met a lot of your relatives, I felt like I was coming home.
Neat.
And it was life-changing for me to go to Wisconsin. And we didn't grow up with your family members.
No.
So I would meet a couple here and there, but really didn't know any of them. And we all just hugged each other. I think we all sang Amazing Grace. Is that what we sang, the granddaughters? We sang Amazing Grace, and everybody started singing at the same time. And we all kind of ended up in tears like, we're family. We're family, because what we have in common matters so much. And that's kind of all that matters, are those things that we actually share.
Exactly. Whether you put a label on it, it's more important to have the feeling than a label. So eliminate the label, because often it's negative, can be, and it separates you immediately. Well, if that's the label, boom, it's not my label. But my sister and I are drastically different because of our backgrounds, but we could live together and talk about differences of upbringing and childhood and mothering and the whole thing.
Okay, now that you're 93 years old, what have you stopped caring about that you cared about before?
Oh, what don't I care about? I still like to go shopping, so I care. I still like nature even more, which I care about. I never drank or smoked, so that's not a deal.
I think it's interesting. I think a lot of women in your same shoes, or women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, will say, I feel so liberated because I no longer care about mostly what people think.
Oh.
But I don't think you ever cared about that.
No, that's why I'm saying.
I think that's why you're 93 with the mental health that you have. Because you don't spend a lot of your mental capacity thinking, but if I do this, what will they say?
Oh, none of that. This is funny. As you can tell by watching me, my hair is not gray and my hair is not white.
It never went gray. It's strange.
It's magical. My son is very gray. My two daughters are gray, and we consider it a phenomenon. So I guess you would have to say, I still care.
You still care about your hair color.
My hair was always this color.
Yep. The things you still care about that still matter 93 years later, these are the things you hold on to. You said nature. What else?
I should put religion at the top of the list. It's not that I don't care, but I have a different outlook because of the diversity in my family, the diversity of my childhood. And so, I should say, being a member of this particular church, that's all I care about. That is not true. And so I care about how you live, what you feel, what you think, how you contribute, how you give to mankind. That's what I care about. And I'm really not a woman that runs around with a pan of freshly baked rolls to give to everybody in the neighborhood. But I've had this compliment many times. You are a breath of fresh air. Oh, and I thought, that sounds really good. What does that mean exactly? And I like the fact of my differences. Acceptable differences.
I think some people run around giving things because they want to show they care. And I think you found a way to show that just with who you are and the questions you asked, back to the things you talked about with teaching, the questions you asked and engaging and making it be about the person and the one and the individual in front of you, which is so inspiring. What do you wish you knew when you were younger
What do I wish that I knew when I was, oh my gosh, I didn't wish and dream about things very much. I was so busy in the moment. I didn't long for material things at all. In fact, I'm extremely impressed with the amount of money that many young couples have today. So I never wished to have a two-wheel bike, but it would have been nice. I had piano lessons. College, I could have wished that my parents helped me, but they didn't. So I went to school looking for the job before I signed up for classes at the university. I could have wished, but it just never was there. It was never a longing. It was like doing what you can do with what you have, and that works. I guess I had a solid background from my parents who didn't yearn for things that weren't available or not possible and didn't measure up. Oh, I do remember one thing. I had a little doll when I was young, and her name was Jane. And she was really cute, but she didn't have many clothes. And my friends, Marita and Alice, had dolls that had a whole wardrobe. Oh, I wish my doll could have had that. And then I went to their bedroom, and in their bedroom they had frilly curtains and fancy bedspreads. Oh, you should have seen my bedroom. I didn't want anyone to see. This is silly, but, they weren't serious. They were childlike observations, not to fret, not to be worried about, not to beg for.
What do you regret?
Oh, you could, as a mother, working mother constantly. I have two daughters who are incredible. One of them is your mother, and they have countless hours of time. Neither one has a career, quote, quote, but the way they teach and handle motherhood, it is a career. Mm-hmm. They are both very giving people. They jump in at the spur of the moment. They're very both talented. So maybe I could say a little bit of a regret as a mother. I thought I was just fine. I never aspired to be like my daughters, but I really like their kind of mothering. And it's not just washing the clothes and making dinner. It goes way beyond that. So, I guess maybe that's kind of a half regret.
How have you kept a sense of purpose and excitement in your older years? And I'll say, speak not to only the 90-year-olds who are going to be listening, because there's less of those. I would say 40-year-olds need the same thing. 50-year-olds, when you go through a transition, sometimes people just leaving high school and they have this fullness and excitement and they were doing all the things. How do you keep that sense of purpose and excitement?
Some people would say have a list of goals. I never had a list of goals, but mentally I did. But I approached a goal and did it, and didn't look too far ahead and make it so impossible to achieve. So my goal was to have happiness, feel happy. For me, it's a lot of mental as well as physical. When I retired from teaching, I thought, I have been so motivated all these years with that kind of a goal and energy. So I found other ways to supplement the kind of mental energy that I was used to having and needing, and I've pretty well fulfilled that. I just happen to like writing, so I have written quite a few books for my books and essays especially. I love writing essays. An essay is an aha. Something happens and it just opens up this burst of energy and thought about what just happened. I've got to write about that. And so I've sent to my grandchildren usually. For example, I wrote 21 typed pages of my courtship with Raleigh, typed pages. And as I was writing it, he'd overhear my commenting about things and he'd say, and I said, Raleigh, why don't you write yours? So he wrote 20 typed pages of our courtship from his perspective. Now, I think that my grandchildren really enjoyed that because seldom do they really know what did their parents do, or I sent it to my children and grandchildren. How did that couple get together? What did they think about? How did they become who they are? So writing is one particular way that I have filled gaps. I've also asked for church callings, and I've said I'm the pianist in Relief Society, and I have 3 people that I supposedly am a humanitarian visitor with, and I said I need something else. So, and so they had me interview all the women every time they need to have an interview with the Relief Society presidency. I have to call them and arrange the interviews. Now that doesn't sound exciting, but it's fulfilling. I'm in touch with people. I'm on the computer. I'm able to do relatively well in the world of media. I don't know. Those questions are hard to answer, aren't they?
Okay, question about your writing that I'm curious about. When you talk about things that give you meaning and purpose, you didn't set out to be a writer to become a New York Times bestseller.
No.
There wasn't some achievement that if I do this thing, then I will have an award or people will acknowledge me. And you're not seeking that outside validation. No. It was writing for the sake of writing. How do you think that's different when someone thinks about what is the next project I can take on? Do you think there's pitfalls in one way? Is there a way you'd recommend going after something new? Because not everyone's going to like writing.
No.
But I think this applies to other things you do as well.
I think so. People will often say, well, I'm not a writer, meaning I say to them, why don't you write about this? And, oh, I'm not a writer. I said, can you talk? And so people have a misconception about that world, for example, at least the kind of writing that I do. They're just thoughts. There are feelings and thoughts that I think are worth sharing. I think people can do that. Attacking new projects, well, I think you have to make a list almost, because if you're stumbling and saying, I don't know what's new, well, maybe it could be crocheting, and maybe you could meet with somebody. I have a neighbor who's a brilliant quilter, and so she invited me, and for a little while after I retired, I said, oh, this is artistic, and she's a very artistic quilter, but it wasn't for me. After I took her lessons and with other women who did that. So that wasn't for me, and that was okay. But I enjoyed the relationship with the people. So sometimes if you can get involved, book groups are great for some of us. We're not teachers. We're just general public people who love to read and share ideas. But that was new. I started that in my own neighborhood, actually. It's been going for a long time because I loved reading and found all kinds of people who did. You could step out, I think, and I've thought of the world of art because I'm pretty good at sketching, but I've never pursued painting or watercolor. Watercolor intrigues me. I have a friend, anytime I decide another project, she'll be right there to help me. She gives lessons to many other people.
Some of the things I hear you say are try things that you may not know that you like yet, or if you have any interest in, but quilt, walk, do some things. Also find other people to do things with.
Right.
Find someone who's already good at it or might be interested or wants that you may want to get to know better, and it doesn't really matter what you do if you're walking or quilting or something. I think there's something to the fact that you don't set out to be the best or win an award or achieve. It's doing it for the sake of doing it.
Raleigh and I, in the teaching field, looked at each other one day after we retired, and we said, we can honestly say we never did one thing for a selfish reason. That's very thought-provoking. That's the beauty of teaching, which, we're one of a few, but you don't do it for increase in salary or a title or an honor or recognition or any of that. But whatever it is that is fulfilling to you. And for me, it's a people-to-people thing. So I would have a hard time probably sitting behind a computer in this world today, which, how many young men I ask, what are you doing? What's your career? Oh, and it has to do with the world of computers and statistics and analysis, all of which is powerful.
What matters most to you?
What matters most to me is anything to do with family. Yes. And I'm amazed to look at what's happening with my great-grandchildren especially. My grandchildren is a given. They're all parents mostly and have children, and they're forging their way beautifully. It sounds like I envision a picture of perfection, but I don't. But now it is perfection. That's quite an amazing thing to think of your great-grandchildren and they are all perfect. What does that mean? They are perfect. They are perfectly loyal, honest, good students, trustworthy, beautiful, all, which doesn't count, but it does. But all of those things. So I was wishing I'd live another 20 years. I would just love to know how they turn out. But they're going to turn out. And I love their uniqueness. They're not all the same. And already as little children, like a little 3-year-old will ask me questions that I think, how could he even know that? So that's what matters the most, I think.
What do you want your legacy to be?
I want it to be, I haven't thought about it especially. I don't worry about it. I am who I am. I'm not in control. Whatever I've done is my legacy. Maybe that I am a intellectually spirited person, that I'm in tune with the beauties of nature. That's on the top of my list, because that's, if you're thinking God and wherever all that is, nature makes me think about that in a very simple, honest way. I'm a simple person when it comes to religion, actually, although questioning. So questioning person, I like it to be part of my legacy. Always searching for new, searching for answers, searching for opinions, and handling, adjustments. That is important. I think, I forgot which author said, but he said, life is a matter of adjustments. And I thought, how true. Like this recent fall that I had, I totally have had to make an adjustment. But because I'm doing very well. So, yeah.
It's beautiful. You've lived that. You've shown that. And I would add to that an openness and a desire to see things from someone else's perspective.
Yes.
I think the only time I see you get riled up is when someone's not willing to do that. Or when they're kind of set. And I can tell that's the only thing that gets under your skin is, but what if there's another way? What if there's another way to look at it or think about it? Or what if someone's experienced it differently? And it feels like that you hold that as most meaningful to you, that give room for everyone.
And the word respect, I think, is right in there. If you respect, what does that mean? Well, the root word is S-P-E-C-T, which means to look. And R-E means again. Respect means to look again. And in my teaching, I seldom had a big page of rules on the first day. I put the word respect on the board. And I said, you can ask me anything about what can we do or not do, and I will point with that word. So that, can we chew gum in your class? I'd point to respect. And any other issue that kids would likely ask. So I do respect humanity, ideas, people.
And that's why you keep reading. And that's why you keep talking to people, is you want to keep looking again with fresh eyes and seeing it. For those listening today, what's the one piece of advice of everything you shared that you hope they listen to?
Be curious about life, which enables you to keep learning and enables you to keep respecting others. Because the more you learn, just as an individual, the more I learn about someone, I'm totally respectful of that person. To me, that's kind of a key.
Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing your 93 years of wisdom. I will always hold it in my heart that you said if you could pick one person to eat with, it would be me. Let's do this again. I had a blast, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome, Liz.